Coming up on DFE News, want to burn the U.S. flag? Better think twice. It could cost you your freedom. Also, you break the law, you'll have to pay. Cashless bail is going away. And the birth dearth. Apparently, the planet needs lots more babies. Focus on the families. Glenn Stanton tells us why. We've got news for you, those stories and more right now on DFE News. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on DFE News. News done right. I'm Jeff Kirk. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment so everyone gets to see DFE News. So much is going on. Let's get right to it. Thinking about burning that U.S. flag as a symbol of your freedom of speech? Better make sure you're not breaking any other laws while you're doing it. Eyebrows on both sides of the political aisle were raised when the president signed an executive order Monday to prosecute those who desecrate the U.S. flag. But to really understand what this order says, you'll have to read more carefully than the media wants you to. The order says that prosecution will be for those who violate U.S. laws in ways that involve desecrating the flag, unrelated to expression, which is consistent with the First Amendment. This means if you burn a flag in a national park where it's illegal to light your own fire, you could be prosecuted for burning a flag. If you steal someone else's flag and burn it, you could be prosecuted for burning a flag. Some Republicans who favor the flag burning punishments say since most Democrats immediately take the opposite view of President Trump on nearly every subject, this executive order could be a trap to get the left to go all in on flag burning. In yet another executive order signed Monday, the president took steps to eliminate cashless bail systems. In case you're unfamiliar, cashless bail is when a judge lets a defendant go without ordering them to pay cash for bail. Supporters say it's the only fair option for people with low income, and it prevents overcrowding in jails. But some recent studies show that putting criminals back on the streets without bail typically results in them committing further crimes.
Cashless bail policies are a key driver of the disorder we see on city streets all over America. Catch and release system allows criminals to keep going back out onto the street and reoffending. What this executive order does, it charges your attorney general with identifying jurisdictions all over the country that have cashless bail policies, and then it withholds or revokes federal funds and grants that are flowing to those jurisdictions.
Those in favor of the president's move say it's another win for law and order and another move to protect hardworking, law-abiding Americans. A recent article by author Glenn Stanton shows that birth rates around the world are plummeting to record lows. DFE's Catherine Joyce explains how that affects all of us. Catherine?
Hi, Jeff. So it's not just a clever rhyme. The birth dearth is something we're actually experiencing, and it could have dire consequences. Joining me today is the Reverend Dr. Charles Spomer from Redeemer Lutheran Church in Burlington, North Carolina. So, Pastor Spomer, are we still under the biblical mandate to be fruitful and multiply?
I believe we are. I believe that when God gives us that mandate, it's not merely a suggestion. And I think that when people do not carry out that mandate to the best of their ability, given what God has given them, which is their abilities to reproduce, procreate, as well as their ability to think about what is the possibilities for them and how to organize and regulate their lives. I think that we need to continue to do what God says, to replenish the earth and subdue it.
And why do you think people are choosing not to have children anymore?
Well, to be perfectly frank with you, I think it is a matter of pretty much selfishness. I think it's something, an overriding sense of autonomy, self-autonomy, that I am the one who should make all my decisions for myself, which is not a good idea. We see throughout the ages the results of human beings making the decisions for themselves, and the result of that for not only creation but also society and their relationship with God. So I think when we follow God's mandate, we're much better off in all respects.
So what do you think we could do about this?
Well, I think one of the things we can do is to try to combat, in a cultural sense, this whole business of absolute autonomy. We see evidences of it all around the world. For instance, the whole issue of assisted suicide. That's an absolute autonomy. I get to do what I want with my life, rather than saying, okay, so God wants us to fulfill our purpose in replenishing the earth and subduing it. I think there may be some pretty dire consequences to not doing that.
So I read in the article that Glenn wrote that one of the things we lose when we don't have a population that continues is ideas, new ideas, creativity, new solutions. What do you think about that?
I believe that's true. A friend of mine told me 40 years ago that when he saw my children playing on the living room floor, he said, you have to think about all these people who don't want you to have children, and you've got this whole bunch of kids. He said, one of them is going to be one of the people who comes up with solutions for the various problems that we're having. And I think that that's true. Just take a look at medicine. If we still operated under the same kind of ideas that we did 150 years ago, we'd be nowhere. Everybody who comes into that generation questions the assumptions of the previous generation, and they come up with new ideas, and it furthers not only knowledge, but it furthers the welfare of human beings. Farming, crying out loud. If we farmed the way we did 150 years ago, think about what that would be like. Then the world would starve. But things are continuing to progress.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Spomer. The effects of a declining population are real and they are dire, but you can help. So we heard Pastor Spomer say that God encourages us to get married and be fruitful and multiply. And thankfully, that's good math. To borrow a tagline from a Christian credit union, good for you, good for the church and the world. In Missouri, for DFE News, I'm Catherine Joyce. Back to you, Jeff.
Thanks to Catherine and to Pastor Spomer for that report. We wanted to dive even deeper into this topic by speaking directly to the article that Catherine referred to. Joining us now is Glenn Stanton, Director of Global Family Formation Studies at Focus on the Family. Glenn, could you explain some of the research that you've done or seen that shows fertility rates are dropping?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeff, so thank you so much for having me on. This is a very, very significant problem. If we do not reproduce the next generation of humanity, we don't have a future. Babies are the future. And just as at the end of July, the U.S. Census Bureau reported that our nation's fertility rate hit an all-time low of 1.6 children per fertile age-bearing age woman. And we have never had, that is far below replacement level. Replacement level is 2.1. That's basically to replace you, to replace your husband. And then the 0.1 is just to bump up the population just an inch. Of course, nobody has 0.1 children, but on an average, having 2.1. And we have not been in our country, we have not been at or above replacement level since 2007. There are very few countries in the world that are even at replacement level. So every time we shrink below replacement level in our fertility rate, we are shrinking exponentially future generations. And most people think that we have too many people in the world today. We have 8.2 billion people. 8.2 billion people can fit within the state of Wyoming with enough room to swing their arms around and not touch anybody. 8.2 is a lot of people, but the earth is nowhere close to being full. And we grow enough food today to feed 10 billion people. And demographers tell us that at the rate we're going, we will not reach 10 billion people. Our population will continue to grow to about 9 billion, and then it will start to shrink and precipitously fall. And so that is the end of humanity.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. You mentioned those record low rates. What are some of the causes of the rates dropping so low below that replacement level?
Well, it's interesting that, I mean, what are the causes of that? The causes are simple, is husbands and wives ceasing to meet fertility rates, you know? Um, that's the irony, is the way to have a robust population is one of the easiest things in the world. It's what husbands and wives do. They come together in the marital embrace and they have children. But we are getting the idea, something is driving the idea in our society, and we can talk about that in just a minute, but that too many children are a problem to the future. But the fact of the matter is, too few children are actually the real problem. And demographers and economists are telling us that the declining population rate is a very significant and pressing problem.
Yeah, we've heard for decades and decades that overpopulation was going to be the cause of the end of the world. We were going to run out of resources. We were going to run out of room. It seems like now the whole idea has been reversed, and now we have the opposite problem. We don't have enough.
Yeah, and demographers are starting to realize that. It's the environmental movement that is pushing, and environmental radicals that are pushing this idea that we have too many people, that we won't be able to feed them, we won't be able to house them, but we are doing quite well at taking care of the 8.2 billion people that we have on the earth. And the economists and the demographers, secular demographers and economists, are the ones telling us that we have to start driving robust fertility growth in order to have the kind of progress that we have made in the modern world in the last 100 years.
So are those the low rates that we're seeing, is that consistent across all demographics, all locations, or are there locations and demographics that are producing above replacement level?
There are a few countries, but they're very, very rare. And like the continent of Africa is seeing above replacement rate. The continent of Africa is improving tremendously in terms of poverty, in terms of famine and things like that. Things are getting better, and they're getting better because their populations are growing. But they are going to start slowing down in their population. But the overwhelming majority of countries in the world are well below replacement level. Countries like Japan, South Korea, China, a number of countries, Canada is one of them, Ukraine, Spain, Italy, Poland, they are far, far below replacement level, which means there's not going to be those countries in a couple of generations because they're simply not replacing themselves.
Right. So that's the slowing of the growth of the population, but now there's this current idea of depopulation, or actually reducing the population of the world. Where does that idea come from?
Well, what happens is that once it's kind of like a plane nosediving, and any pilot knows that it can only nosedive so far. Well, okay, the real danger is when it hits the ground, right? But pilots know that once it starts declining, it's nearly impossible to pull it out. And demographers know that very correctly. There's a well-known book called Empty Planet that two Canadian scholars wrote about declining population. And they say in the next couple of decades, there is going to be an inevitable culling of the human herd, that we are going to start becoming less and less and less, because once the population declines, there's something in the public psyche that disallows us of being able to pull out of that nosedive and recover. But the good news is it really comes down to this: mothers and fathers, husbands and wives coming together to create at least 3 babies each. That's not hard. And families are a wonderful thing. Families are a good thing. And so, as the pastor had so wisely said, God's great command, his first command to go forth and multiply, is still very, very, very much in effect. And you know who's telling us it's more in effect? It's not Christian pastors. It's secular demographers and secular economists.
Yeah, that's interesting that that there's a bit of that dichotomy going on, because
Yeah.
it seems like over the last time out of mind that secular culture has been encouraging more promiscuity on behalf of single people, even among married people. And yet, what we're seeing now is now no one's having children, even though maybe as a whole society is becoming more and more promiscuous.
Well, and see, that's the thing is we have separated sex from procreation. Sex is for fun, babies are for somebody else. And we don't recognize that those two things go together. Those two things need to go together because sex is fundamental to the marital relationship, but it's also fundamental to the creation of the next generation of humanity. And so what we have to do is put those two things back together and see the goodness of human sexuality, but also the goodness of procreation as well.
So what are the benefits of a growing population, a growing world?
Okay, so that is a great, great, important question. And we need to understand that over the last 60 years, the last 50 years, our air is getting cleaner, our water is getting cleaner, our food is getting more plentiful. We're growing more food than the current population can eat on less land per capita than any time in modern history. That is all because of human innovation. And human innovation has grown at the very time that our population has been growing. And economists tell us, in fact, the gentleman who won the Nobel Prize in 2018, a guy named Paul Romer, won it for something called endogenous growth theory. And he proved that growing populations drive exponential technological growth and problem solving. And so what growing populations provide is more minds, more creative minds to work together, to innovate together and produce solving solutions to the problems that we're facing in the world. And that's exactly why the world is, point by point, getting to be a better place today, because our population itself has been so vibrant. And here's the mistake. Many people think that growing populations are more stomachs that we need to feed, but the real truth is growing populations are growing intellects that solve, that innovate. And our ability to innovate is much stronger than the appetites in our stomachs. We can overcome those things, and we have been.
Yeah, that reminds me, perhaps a little bit flippant, but it reminds me of Thanos from the Avengers movies. He wants to eliminate half the population of the whole universe so that everyone else who lives can have more resources. But it sounds like he's got it exactly backwards. But speaking of media, I mean, we have those kinds of influences in our media that we consume. How can media turn the tables and become a positive message for population growth?
Well, media will have to stop being part and parcel of the environmental movement that thinks that people are the problem. They need to be able to tell the story that declining birth rates are not good, and that growing birth rates are that which stimulate the advancement of humanity, that stimulate the economy, that stimulate the world of ideas, and that we are a better people today. And it's an empirical fact. We are a better, healthier, more peaceful people today, living more friendly with the environment because of growing population, and because the growing population has created greater stimulation and greater innovation with problem-solving abilities.
Yep, all to the glory of God. Glenn, we've had your contact information on the screen, so people know how to get in touch with you if they have any questions. Glenn Stanton of Focus on the Family, thank you for joining us today.
Jeff, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you might have heard about the rise of the nuns, that's Nones, those who say they have no religious affiliation. But some surprising new information shows that Gen Z are making their way back to God. Most generations typically are less religious than the previous generation, but that's not the case with Gen Z. Pew Research shows 46% of millennials identify as Christian, and so do 46% of Gen Z. And it's not just in the US, the same trend is being seen all across the globe. What's really surprising is that research shows that Gen Z men are leading the way in their Christian walk. Usually women are more likely to join the church, but for Gen Z, men are closing the gender gap as more of them are joining the church while more Gen Z women are leaving it. One explanation for the trend is that Gen Z was more affected by the isolation of COVID, so they're finding community and connection in religion. Another theory is that the church doesn't automatically see young men as a source of society's problems. Maybe it's both. That's it for now. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, comment, and engage with us so that YouTube and all the socials push it out to more viewers. If you're interested in becoming a DFE News sponsor, you can click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. Thanks for watching DFE News, news done right. See you next time.